Hey, welcome back. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Ian. This is Opinion. And if you're a Star Wars fan, and if you're watching my channel, you probably are, you know that the day has finally come where we got a new Star Wars series on a new Disney channel that premiered last week. You might have heard of it, a little thing called Disney Plus and a little series called The Mandalorian. I thought Jesus was coming, but he wasn't. It was just Disney Plus launching, and here we are, folks. We got some more Star Wars. So as a longtime Star Wars fan, I had a lot of reactions to this series so far. And what I've decided to do is all the episode 1 reviews came out really quickly. And as you know, YouTube and Twitter are very fast rivers. So what I decided to do was combine my reviews of episode 1 and 2 and give those to you at the same time, one right after the other. It's really hard to avoid these days with social media because there's spoilers all over the place. Even if you don't want them, they're really hard to avoid. So I want to get into this. And basically, in a nutshell, what the first episode does for us is it introduces us to the Mandalorian, played by Pedro Pascal. And we find him in the midst of collecting what seems like the last of a current round of bounties before he turns those in, gets his next assignment, and goes on his next job. Episode 1 for me took a little while to get going. It was very panoramic. It was really nice to look at. And it was a lot of walking. It was a lot of, Mando, I'm going to call him that from here on out because it's just easier. Mando going into a bar, Mando walking to his ship, Mando going to another place, Mando going to another bar. A lot of walking, to the point where I felt like Mr. Plinkett. Walking. I immediately got the feel of space western, and that's very obvious what they're going for. I mean, you've got the tropes, it's filled with tropes. It's filled with Western tropes. It's filled with Star Wars tropes. Like, Star Wars is now troping itself with familiar things and Easter eggs. And we're going to talk about Easter eggs and that whole topic later. But, we get the iconic shot of Mando walking into the bar, and instead of, the swinging saloon doors, we have the space door instead. The music is very reminiscent of that. We go right in, and almost immediately we run into a tussle. I remember seeing The Phantom Menace eons ago, and in the very first scene with the Neimoidians, the Trade Federation people, the minute we saw them and the minute they spoke, I kind of went, oh, something's a little off here. Well, I got that exact same feeling in the very first scene of The Mandalorian, because we've got Horatio Sanz, who's, good comic actor, playing this run-of-the-mill, really generic Star Trek type character, this blue guild character who looked like what the little babies in Galaxy Quest grow up to be later on. And it just was completely the wrong vibe. And I thought, wow, what is going on here? And not only that, we get to see him and Mando in more scenes that goes on for another 5 to 7 minutes. It was really the wrong tone, because the tone is dark and gritty, and then we just kind of get this. It just looked like they went into the warehouse, found a mask that they were like, oh yeah, this is good, and just slapped it on an actor and said, go. 3, 2, 1, go. Here's the scene. The first episode also takes us to 3 different locations. We start out on an ice planet. Another ice planet. I'm going to put those down so I stop shaking. Then we go to, I don't know what the second planet is, where he goes and gets his next assignment and negotiates, and we meet some of the Mandalorian tribe. It looks unironically like Galaxy's Edge in Disneyland. I don't know if you noticed that, but I was watching that and I was expecting someone to walk across the screen with a Disney name tag, or somebody wearing mouse ears in it or something, but it looked a lot like Galaxy's Edge, and makes me And then we go to another desert planet, another desert planet, another ice planet, and another desert planet in the first episode of this brand new Star Wars series, original series for Disney Plus. Okay, I'm over it. I'm going to move on. So here's what I really liked about the episode. visually, I mean, you go from one beautiful locale to another. They use the wipes. It is high quality television filming. For me, it's basically cinematic quality, from the sweeping vistas to the colors to the camera setups. It wasn't just your average run-of-the-mill, here we go with another series that we push out and get on the small screen for home. No, this is definitely raises the bar on going like, look at this. This looks great. I also liked that this episode did have a good amount of practical effects. We had like a salacious crumb species puppet. I didn't quite like the scenario that they were in. That was weird. I think we had some large scale puppet stuff with the close-ups of the blurgs. The blurgs are basically dewbacks that have been just reduced to tadpole size, that have stumpy elephant legs and little arms that basically don't do anything. The blurgs date all the way back to the made-for-TV film, The Battle for Endor, which was the second part of the Ewok Adventures. So if you go and look at that, go watch that, because they're in there. The blurgs are in there. And there's a huge amount of aliens and droids all over the place, like littering every world that Mando goes to. And that I really like. It's interesting to look at. You are seeing aliens and things that you have not seen before. I thought that the ending in this episode, it took a little while to get there, but some more action happened. I gotta tell you, we didn't get a lot of action going up to this. It's so much walking. And I think once Favreau and Filoni kind of get over making these Valentines to old time Westerns that were on TV. And I get where they're going with this. I get the idea. That's what we're watching. But there comes a time when you gotta push the action forward, and it really didn't do this for me in this episode. Let's talk about the acting. I feel like we're getting a very intentional, slow introduction to Pedro Pascal as Mando. We get a little bit of a flashback with him where it hints at kind of a traumatic childhood. We know that he's part of the Mandalorian tribe now, obviously. And my only thing about male Mandalorians, and that's pretty much all we know by now, because there haven't been any huge female Mandalorian characters yet, is they all get reduced to this kind of monolithic, monotone, husky, gravelly, there's this voice coming from inside the helmet. And do they all have to be like that? We get a little bit of color in some of the delivery of Pascal's lines, but it's just not enough for me yet to really be sold on this character. I think he's actually coming across as kind of a nice guy, and I don't know if I like that so far. I know Carl Weathers is a seasoned actor, and the fact of the matter is we just don't get enough of him in this episode. We're not supposed to. We get a little hint to his character because he wants to make sure that there's enough to go around for all the bounty hunters. So that gives you a little glimpse into whatever he is as the Bounty Guild director or Bounty Guild president. Werner Herzog as the client. What an interesting character to me. I thought his line delivery was just that right amount of diplomat, but villain, but negotiator. We also get a little tiny glimpse of a fella playing a character named Dr. Pershing, who kind of bursts into the room for a second, like, don't shoot, don't shoot. I think Taika Waititi was fine as IG-11. I've seen some of his stuff. I've seen some of his acting. I'm not sure what it was about him that made them go, yeah, it's got to be this guy. Outside of the fact that him and Jon Favreau are good buddies, I think that was a little bit of buddy casting. We're so used to the trope now of kind of the sarcastic, go by the books droid, like the one in Rogue One. I think they were really going for that feeling. Just like, I have a job to do, but I'm kind of funny. A lot of the smaller roles just did not fit the bill for me. The bearded thug at the beginning of the episode was not only kind of not well written, but really poorly acted. I mean, and then the other there's a lot of bearded people in this. The other guy who drove the speeder to get Mando and Mithril back to his ship didn't like that either. I will tell you who I think nailed this and is just nailing this. Nick Nolte. I was like, where the hell did they get him from? They just dusted him off and got him in here. His character of Kuil, I think it's Kuil, is so captivating. He's just interesting. You don't have to hear him say a lot of things to understand what his intentions and motivations are. He's got a very Star Wars look. I love that he has a practical face. He's kind of the equivalent of, the old isolated rancher in a Western who meets the protagonist is just like, well, in these parts, we're gonna, we do things a certain way. And he teaches him to ride the blurgs. Now, my problem with that whole plot line in this first episode was that it seemed completely unnecessary. It's very truncated. It's very fast. He says, "Oh, you gotta learn to ride a blurg." He does that in about 5 minutes. And then he says, "Oh, you gotta ride these blurgs because the way to the compound where these bad people are is impossible to pass. And you can't do it without a blurg." Well, they never really show you anything of like why it's impossible. They get there incredibly fast. They jump over some gaps in the sand, and that's about it. I think that would have been a great opportunity to show that these creatures do something that we hadn't seen them do before. Like maybe you get to a big chasm that you can't just jump across and they inflate and float you across, or do something interesting. But it was never explained why they had to take these animals to that location. And don't tell me that it was because they weren't ships and they would go undetected by the people in the compound. Here's why. Because IG-11 walks right into that compound with no warning and no detection whatsoever. And everybody just gets up and like, oh crap, there's a big assassin droid here. It was filler. Action-wise, it took a little while to get to the action. And then when we finally got to the action, I didn't think it really had any tension, especially the final battle scene, because IG-11 just comes in and he's just this tank, man. He's the pew, 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 pew. He just has precision. He takes out a whole bunch of thugs at the compound with very little effort. I was never really worried for him and Mando together. I did like the little bit about he's like, I'm going to self-destruct. That's what I'm going to do because I don't want them to catch me. I thought that was funny for like 30 seconds, but I was like, there's really not a lot of tension here. There's two things about Easter eggs and nostalgia in this episode that bugged me, and one of them is this. When Mando gets to the desert planet and he's surveying and he sees the blurgs far away, there's a couple of blurgs just kind of eating dirt or whatever it is they do, or humping, I don't know what they do out there in the dirt, and he pans over and then there's one right there, a la Tusken Raider, and it's a complete reenactment of Luke's scene when he sees the Banthas and there's no Tusken Raiders, but then there's a sand person right there in his face. You could just say, yeah, Ian, well, of course they did that on purpose to remind you, but my question is, why? Another example is anytime we see a character in these shows like the Kubaz, the guy with the snout, who was a spy in A New Hope, and then in this one he summons like Galactic Lift to come pick up Mando, and he's got a little flute. He goes doo 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 doo. That was weird. Anytime we see a character like that, or the gatekeeper droid, that like the one in Jabba's door, not only are they showing us the thing from the past, but it's speaking the exact same dialogue no matter what the context is of the new scene that they're in. What the Kubaz was saying in this had nothing to do with what he was telling the stormtroopers in New Hope, and yet the exact same lines of dialogue are coming out of his mouth. I don't understand it. Just make new dialogue. The minute somebody starts to sing the praises of nostalgia and Easter eggs and something like this, I get a little nervous, because those two things to me are not storytelling, they are gimmicks. Nostalgia is in everything now, and nostalgia just sucks you right in. And it's hard to reconcile because you're watching it going, yes, I remember that. Oh, that's familiar, that's familiar, that's familiar. But where's the story? Why did they reference the holiday special in this? I get it as kind of an Easter egg, but just why? What you probably noticed already is that the Mandalorian's gun is the same gun that Boba Fett had in the animated sequence within the holiday special. But going back to Mithril, going back to Blue Merman, he says, I was hoping to celebrate Life Day this year. And everybody knows that that's a specifically Wookiee holiday. So why would he be referencing that? They just throw that in. And that's very surprising to me for people who know their Star Wars lore so well, like, Filoni. Don't give me no Filoni baloney. Okay, so I got to get some really nitpicky shit off my chest. Nitpicky shit. Why does Mando have a travel size carbon freeze chamber in his ship? When did that become a thing? And when was it established that carbon freezing was now a reliable way of trapping and transporting actual people? Now he's just got a closet unit. You just push somebody in and the carbon freezes. I get that the Empire has been overthrown, but isn't the disheveled state of these stormtroopers just a little extra? And what's with the medallion around his neck like he just ran the Imperial 5K? Land speeders on an ice planet with a windshield this high. I told you this was nitpicky stuff, so just bear with me, but why would that be a practical way to get around an ice planet? Got to talk about the bantha in the room, and this is, I guess, spoiler territory. If you don't want to hear this, go on to episode... Oh, wait, you probably haven't seen episode 2 either. Proceed with caution, I guess. At this point, there isn't much that's been left to the imagination in the Disney... Oh, see, I meant Star Wars universe. In this Disney Star Wars universe. Luke lost his lightsaber, doesn't matter. Comes back with no explanation and is found in a trunk. Darth Vader's body gets cremated, doesn't matter. We found his mask, and Kylo Ren now has it. We all know the Emperor is coming back in episode 9. So there's nowhere left to go with a lot of these things. So what do we got now? Yoda. I have a huge problem with this Yoda portion of the storyline. George Lucas himself said he didn't need a lot of explanation of Yoda, and I have always respected that. I've always found Yoda to be a fascinating character. I don't need to know about him. I don't need to know where he came from. I didn't need to see him do a lightsaber fight in the prequels. I don't need to know his species. Yaddle didn't even talk. How about that? She's out there kind of in the ether too. So there's a Yoda and a Yodette, whatever they are. Well, now we've got the perfect trifecta because now a baby of Yoda's species has been introduced into the fold. And God damn it. I guess we're just going to go into that now. And I'm praying that they don't explain too much about this. My guess is that because as the aforementioned Dr. Pershing is in this episode, something's going on. And it's also been pointed out on Twitter that he has the Camino cloning symbol on his uniform. So something's going on with cloning. They either want him to clone him, or he is a clone and somebody took him, or they want to find out about how to harness the Force. I mean, I think we can kind of see where this is going, but God, this storyline bugs me because why? I don't want to see any more of Yoda. I want him to remain as he was. Yes, the baby is adorable. Yes, everyone's getting suckered in, and I know they want the plush and the action figure. I get it, but it bugs me. The fact that's been thrown into the mix is that this baby Yoda, which is the bounty, which is the big, ta-da moment of this episode, is 50 years old. This species at 50 years old is still in a cradle. Why does that have to be the case? Why can't it just be that Yoda's species matures very quickly and then lives for a very, very, very long time? I just find it hard to swallow this development in the line of Yoda, the House of Yoda, as you will. We're going to talk about this more in episode 2, so that's coming up. Last thing I got to talk about is the music. Ludwig Göransson delivers a very different score for this series, and just doesn't do it for me. It's a lot of riffs of flutes and pan flutes and a little bit of percussion. It's very minimal. Mando's main theme is pretty okay with me, but I did detect shades of Rocky and Battlestar Galactica. You can tell very clearly that in the very first scene when Mandalorian walks into a bar, a Mandalorian walks into a bar, there's kind of like this little flute riff that happens every time he kind of goes somewhere and everybody goes, "Who's that?" Which is very reminiscent of the main theme of The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. I'm not going to dance around this. The score is kind of boring to me. It doesn't really feel like Star Wars. There's a little bit of humor, but boy, this just isn't very much fun. I know this is post-Empire Star Wars world. I know that this is a pseudo-Western bounty hunter series. And I know that we need the grit and we need the seriousness, but God, we got to have a little bit of humor in there, and there's not enough humor in this episode to sell me quite yet. So let's move on to episode 2, and I'm even going to move on to this side of the chair to show you that I mean business. I think you're going to find that each of these episodes is going to start with a little fight. Either he starts a fight or someone attacks him, because the fight in episode 1 and episode 2 happened about the same time distance in to each episode. I checked on that, and yeah, it's definitely a formula. So there's going to be a fight. There's always going to be a fight. So the basic plot of this one is Mando has successfully collected his bounty and Baby Yoda. They're traveling together now, and he's got to get back to his ship and get on his way to deliver this bounty. However, after meeting back with Nick Nolte as Angry Ugnaught, who I love, he discovers that his ship has basically, in East LA style, been put on blocks and completely stripped by the Jawas. So his big dilemma is he can't get off the planet, and he's got to now negotiate with the Jawas to get all his parts back and repair his ship and get the hell out of Dodge. What I did like about this was we took a little bit of a deep dive more into Jawa culture and a little more one-on-one kind of like, what are the Jawas really about? Why did they have red eyes in this? Look, if that's some sort of like supplement or video game or some novel or some shit that I need to go look at to understand why the Jawas had red eyes in this, I'm not doing that. I'm telling you right now, I'm not doing this. I'm watching this because I'm looking at it with my eyes. I'm not going to go read a pamphlet to know. So will you please tell me the answer to that? Why did the Jawas have red eyes in this? I will say that the action does pick up in this episode, seeming a little more quickly. They're still in love with showing Mando walking everywhere, walking. And here's my discrepancy, is he walks back from the compound where he found Baby Yoda. You know, the place that Kuil insisted that they had to ride the blurgs to. They had to ride the blurgs too, but he walked back with no explanation. So that just, to me, flushed the whole blurg plotline down the toilet a second time. They weren't necessary. They're interesting creatures, but that was that. When you talk about Easter eggs, the Jawas literally send Mando to go get an egg from a monster, from like a rhinoceros. I just made that up. But they literally send him to go get an egg, and it is kind of built up as if this egg is something really important that they're going to trade it or something like that. But lo and behold, he gets the egg, and they just eat it. They crack it open and eat it. And it looks like the world's largest Cadbury Easter egg. You know, those chocolate ones that are wrapped in colored foil. So you get this huge moment, and then it's kind of turned on its end. And I thought that was kind of interesting. Even Mando just kind of goes, ugh, which I do, because Cadbury eggs gross me out. Okay, here's my big problem with episode 2. And I fully accept that I'm probably in the minority on this, just like I accept that my fan base, I imagine, are people who love to banter and have different opinions, and that's the beauty of it. So we're going into spoiler territory, and you've got till the end of this sentence to turn off the sound if you don't want to hear it. Okay. One of my biggest issues with these first 2 episodes is that twice, as plot points, the Mandalorian gets saved from attacking creatures by another character in the story. That's getting really, really old really fast, and I hope that they kind of find another device as we go forward. And they probably will, because he doesn't have to deal with these creatures anymore. Baby Yoda levitating the Rhinoceropolis and saving Mando. Oh boy. This bugs me on levels that I just, like, I knew we were going to start going there with this unexplained character, which tells me that we're going to find out more about Yoda's species and something about them being force sensitive very early for a very long time. It's probably going to be established that Yoda's species are all kind of like force species, and that's why they want them. They're coming. The spoiler police are coming for me. You hear them? I think this major moment that they inserted into this episode just brings us to the point of no return. It bugged me that Rey could move a ton of rocks at the end of The Last Jedi, and it bugged me that this baby Yoda moved this giant creature and levitated it to give Mando a couple minutes to get his bearings and kill it, essentially. It says so many things that we can't reverse, and that's under my skin. We can't go back now. Now that's going to have to be explained. That's so not where I want the series to go. The length of these episodes are troublesome. If you think about it, if you do the math, we're going to get 8 episodes, about 32 to 35 minutes long. At the end of this, folks, we're going to have about 4 hours of story. I think they just should have made 2 damn movies. It's just not enough story. I think Disney Plus had something to do with this to kind of like keep you baiting on that hook. And I get that to a point, but we need more story, and it's not fulfilling enough. I'm waiting for this series to pick up. I got there a little bit more in this episode. I'm waiting to meet other characters. I'm waiting to learn more about other characters that we only met for a second. I think that could be very interesting. And I'm waiting for it to be a little more like Star Wars, because I'm not having quite the time that I was expecting to have yet. And I don't know if we're going to get there. I think that grit and, this essence of gritty has kind of overtaken Star Wars right now. And it loses a little bit of the magic, but it's still very early, and I think that we're going to find out. Before I end, I have to give a special shout out to a YouTube friend of mine named Death by Saber. He has been a huge supporter of my channel and has sent a lot of people my way, and it's really, really given me a lot of confidence and got me really excited about making some new content for you. So DBS, thank you so much for your help, and I hope that you'll keep watching. And I hope all of you will keep watching and supporting. I love making content for you, and there's definitely more on the way. Thank you for joining me for this 2-episode review of this new series. I would love to hear all about what you think so far. What's great? What's not so great? What's kind of meh? I'm Ian, and that's my opinion. I have spoken. Nope, that's it. That's all we're doing. That's it.